Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, your Swansea City podcast. I'm Matt Brock and I'm joined as ever by Steve Carroll. Evening, Steve.
Evening.
Well, Russell Martins may have ended up getting to fisticuffs on the sidelines, but let's hope this podcast doesn't end up in the same way. For some reason though, Steve, I think we're on the same page with everything that's going on, so let's chat about it. We've got two games to analyse this week. First of all, Rotherham's visit to South Wales last Monday night. It was the last in a batch of games, Steve, where we thought the Swans could really target wins, and it was another one really where we failed to do so.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? It's quite I think it was, like you say, I mean, the third in, games where we're looking at targeted wins, but I mean, it just felt quite flat, didn't it? I mean, Monday nights quite often do, I think, because people quite often are just not fussed on them. I mean, I've always said football's really for a Saturday, isn't it? Certainly not for a Monday, and it just felt like the crowd was quite low, even though the gate was high because they're counting tickets sold as opposed to actual people who turned up. And even the queue for Rossi's when there was fanzine selling was really small. So I think it just sort of sums up where we're at the moment, where the crowd are not that fussed in it. And it was largely uninspiring again, wasn't it? We scored a nice goal, haven't we? With this work from the back, and Perot with a finish reminiscent of the form he was in last season, really. With a nice clean strike, but we've given a terrible goal away again, and the second half was just very uninspiring, wasn't it?
It was. I think the manner of the goal conceded epitomises really where we're at the moment defensively. We're not helping each other. We're actually hindering each other. There's enough players back to deal with Ogbeni back there, Steve. Manning in particular has him literally, he's touching the block and then he decides to throw himself away with his arms in the air and watch the guy fall to the floor and trap the ball under his body and scoop it in the back of the net. It's a mess. It's a horrible mess, and no one looks good in a Swansea shirt in that move. It's embarrassing, and you do wonder what sort of defensive work we do. What work on shape, off the ball, anything like that, because time and again we see goals conceded where you're just thinking, what are we doing? It's a complete calamity back there.
It's embarrassing, isn't it, really? I mean, I'm sick of saying it, how bad it is defensively, and how is a man who's ended up on his backside still managed to scoop the ball in? I mean, look, come on, it's just not good enough, is it? I mean, how many times are we going to score goals that are, I'd say pub team level, or should I say concede goals at a pub team level? Because it just seems to happen far too often, doesn't it? I mean, it's not a surprise that we've conceded we're in the top three, I think, for most conceded goals in the division, and it's exactly what we deserve because we are genuinely pathetic at defending. So, and it's holding us back. That's why we're not winning many games, isn't it? Because we just keep shooting ourselves in the foot, and it was just another one to add to what is a very long list, isn't it? I mean, look, in the end, it felt like a point game, didn't it? I mean, we shouldn't be thinking like that against a team like Rotherham, who are really scrapping for their lives, but it feels like that's where we're at really at the moment, doesn't it? I mean, we're struggling to pick up any points, aren't we? And as you say, I mean, it did feel like that was a reasonable run of fixtures, and we've picked up 4 points from it, which, let's be honest, it probably could have been worse. But everyone's just uninspired, aren't they? It's we look like a team very low on confidence, but we're not as bad as what we're showing, I don't think, are we?
No, I don't think we are. And I think it just needs, it's easy for me to say, but it needs so much concentration on that defence, on the ball and off the ball. And it is just, let's stop giving them. How many times have we said this season, Steve? And Rotherham is a prime example of this. For us to score, we need to do it. We need to score a lovely goal. We do score lovely goals. When we score, it has to be a team goal. A lot of players are involved. We have to move players around left to right and open space and create chances. And Perot arrows it into the bottom corner. It looks aesthetically pleasing. But you put all your hard work into the creation of that goal, and how many times in the past 18 months have we pissed it up the wall by giving the ball away at the back line or not marking from a corner? It's the most simple things. He could score, the best goals. It's just ridiculous that every time we get undone by a calamity, and Rotherham was no different. I think spending time on and off the ball on defence would pay dividends for us, and I don't believe that it's simple enough in the fan base. Steve, I don't know what you think to say Russell Martin is absolved from criticism because the owners didn't back him. Look, two things can be true here. Two things can be true. You can have Russell Martin not being backed. That's true. We know that. The owners are pretty much, they have admitted that in their trust statement, their ill-advised trust statement last month. But that came out. And you can't tell me that this team have been doing the best with what they've got at the moment, because there's no need for Cabango to be making mistakes he makes week in, week out, or Manning to just stand there and watch his man. He's going to leave on a free transfer in the summer. Is he going to be making those mistakes next season? You'd hope not for whoever he's playing for. So if he's not then, so why is he doing them now? Is that because we're not working on these defensive issues in training? Because that's the only solution I can come to, Steve. Are we not working on it? Because we cannot keep making these mistakes every week.
Well, the big concern for me especially has to be that defensively it's getting worse. And I mean, if a manager's been here 18 months and it's getting worse, I don't see how he can't be blamed. He keeps chopping and changing between formations and certain backlines. The only constant really has been Cabango, who can't get dropped, but, isn't playing well either. I suppose Manning, again, is, he seems to play every game, doesn't he? But, I mean, you look at the rest of it. I mean, Latabodier tends to play, but, he has played at centre-back a little bit more recently, but in general has played as a right wing-back, but Sorenola's come in. Then we've seen Darlin and whatever he's called, Wood, those two have alternated quite a lot, haven't they? And then even during games, I think in that Rotherham game, I mean, there was just substitutions, wasn't there, that meant to a change in shape and people changing positions. I mean, that can't be doing any good either. We need to probably stick with what we consider to be our first choice backline and see if we can build a bit of confidence and a bit of understanding, because I just, how else can we try and fix it, really? I'm sure we'll get on to talk about the goalkeeper shortly, but it's not good enough, is it? You can't. I do blame the board for certain things, but the goals we give away, they're just pathetic. I think anybody associated with a lot of them should be embarrassed, because it isn't good enough, is it? It's something you can improve on and coach. I think a lot of the more basic mistakes that we're making, and it's got to improve, isn't it? Because if it doesn't, we're just going to carry on losing games, and we're going to end up dropping down that table. Now, I don't think we're going to go down, because the sides at the bottom are awful, putting it mildly, and we have got a fair gap there. But I mean, you look at next season, it's very concerning, I think. So it has to improve, and it has to improve immediately, because it's just ridiculous, and there's no excuse for it, is there? It's just, how can a team concede so many bad goals? I mean, you're thinking the same thing as me, I know.
Yeah, it's infuriating. I see so much of us. I think the point where I'm at now, Steve, is I don't get it's a horrible thing to say and admit to, but I don't get enthused, because I'm at the point now where I expect us to let the Swans fans down, and that's a horrible thing to think, but you end up watching a game thinking, we're not going to be able to see this out, we're going to concede. I remember we were chatting during the Birmingham game. Of course, the last 15 minutes of the Birmingham game were absolute clusterfuck, from the substitution calamity, Lati going off injured. And I remember turning to you on like 88 minutes or whatever it was and saying, they're going to score in injury time. They'll have 6 or 7 minutes to do so, and they'll score. They didn't think they scored twice. But you can just see now that Swans can't handle pressure. It's all well and good saying that we're comfortable on the ball during the game and we dominate the majority of the game, but that's fine, because the opposition will allow us to do that. The moment the opposition need a goal and they crank up a little bit of the heat, we crumble. And I think that's the issue. Whenever a team comes at us needing a goal, we just buckle. And as you say, looking at it objectively, I think Rotherham was a point gained because there was only one team going to win that in the last 20 minutes, and it wasn't the team in white.
Yeah, it did feel like that, didn't it? And you shouldn't be thinking in the circumstances that it's a point gained against a team like that. But given the way that the game went, I think we have to look at it like that. So, it probably speaks volumes for where we're at and our general lack of faith in the team at the moment. So, a point gain towards, mathematical safety is how you look at it, but very uninspiring. And, I suppose it didn't really get better in terms of results of the weekend either, did it? No,
it didn't. Well, I think Rotherham was probably the last. I remember saying to you, the next three games, Luton, Middlesbrough, Millwall, they're all in the top six. And they're just teams that are going to, they have so much to play for, but also by their league position, they've got that little bit extra quality which the teams we've been playing against recently simply do not have. Excuse me. I was worried coming into this set of fixtures. And I mean, Luton, in truth, didn't really impress me. They were in the position from doing what they do. They're a very disciplined, solid unit. And we maybe showed a little bit more of our good side in the second half against Luton, but nowhere near enough. And really speaking, did we really look like we were going to equalise, I think is the question, isn't it? And once again, we talk about conceding ridiculous goals.
Yeah, we are. I think me and you have said enough times on this podcast that we really do not rate Andy Fisher, and, the man isn't good enough. You're looking at him every game and just thinking there's no hope of a clean sheet. So we've, what can we do? I mean, we've signed this goalkeeper, Sondergaard, and I'm thinking to myself, well, arguably, what's the point of that if you can't play him? Maybe now he has to come in, because Fisher, for me, is a poor goalkeeper anyway. But he's now a poor goalkeeper with no confidence. So what can you, every time he plays, he's killing us. He's nowhere near good enough. And you can't stick up for Martin on that one because of the injury, because this is a guy he's signed for 400 grand. It's not good enough. Like, it's fairly obvious that this guy is nowhere near the level that we need. I mean, what more is there to say? It's the same every time. He costs us a goal constantly. He is a shambles. I mean, there was a mistake in the second half as well, wasn't there? Where he didn't grasp the ball. And you're just thinking, this should be bread and butter for a goalkeeper. I know one or two listening will probably think, Sorinola's, deflection on the cross for the goal didn't help forever, but he's got to claim it. He has to. And the thing is with Fisher, it seems to be something different all the time. Like, he can't catch a cross and he can't save a shot. So if you're a goalkeeper and you can't do those things, what can you do? Well, you see it to the team. So they've got to do something about that. I mean, I'm looking and thinking, well, is there a possibility of a free transfer coming in? Like Kieran Westwood, I think, is a goalkeeper who doesn't have a club, for example. He can't be worse than Fisher. So maybe we need to do something here, because, we're not going to pick up many more points this season, are we, if he stays in goals? I mean, he's a shambles, isn't he?
Like, really speaking, if we even give Fisher's fans, if there are Fisher fans out there, something to hang on to and say he's not as bad as he's currently playing, maybe he isn't. But at the moment, he cannot get himself out of this rut. And playing him is exacerbating the problem. There was one in the first half where a corner came in inside the 6-yard box. Fisher came out and managed to make himself smaller, despite being the only person in the area who could use his hands. And they had a free header. And it should have been in. I mean, it was 6 yards out. It was sent to the goal as well. Second half. The goal, of course, was an absolute fuck-up. And then second half, the one where a shot came in, routine, spills it, should have been 2-0. Did actually make a half-decent recovery to stop it from being 2-0, but it's an issue that should never have existed. So there's three big mistakes in there. He seems to be so low on confidence that you're just hanging him out to dry there. You're feeding him to the wolves because he's playing there and he's shitting bricks. He cannot come for a cross. He cannot save a shot. Noting point, the third goal Stoke scored. It's straight at him. It's not even a great strike. It's just everything that seems to be going towards our goal He fumbles, he panics. So even if we take out how we judge him ability-wise and just look at what's best for him, I really don't think at this point him playing is working. So yes, anything might be better at this point than Fisher, even if it just means he gets a few weeks out of the limelight, like he would have had if Bender was available. I'm sure he would never have come back into the team. But when it had that clanger away at Stoke in the season, Steve, he got taken out of the team and Bender came in and kept his place. So I think from that point of view, Martin needs a similar situation. Now, if Sondergaard hasn't come in here to do that, then first of all, why have you brought him in here? And second of all, we need to find someone who is going to be able to do that, because otherwise we're basically saying we can play the prettiest football at one end of the pitch, and we are creating a decent amount of chances, but there's no point. There's no point if you're going to concede the stupidest goals at the other end. And I don't even get upset about it anymore. And it's sad, because I just think now the season's obviously done. And you know what's damning the most, Steve? I don't see too many Swans players in that team that I would be, and this is really controversial and people might shout at me for this, that I would be devastated to see the back of. Is that bad? I really don't have that many players on my list now who I'd be gutted to see go in the summer. I think a clear out and a rebuild is needed. I just don't think we're going to finance it.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like that, really, doesn't it? I mean, Joel Perreault is probably a good example. I mean, he does have 13 goals, but I just feel like he's been going through the motions all season. I know like I'm not the only person who feels like that. So, don't get me wrong, I do get the feeling that we will miss him. But if he was to go in the summer, which he probably will do, and obviously if we don't replace those goals, then we're going to have a big issue next season. But yeah, I think it feels a little bit like we don't really have like many heroes anymore. Like I look at when we first came down and we had, McBurney, I would say, was a proper like crowd favourite, and some of the off-field stuff like with him where he just felt like he was one of us, really. I mean, obviously some of the guys that have come through the system, the likes of Connor Roberts, don't massively have that now. I mean, obviously I would say Joe Allen is a fan's favourite, but obviously, yeah, his fitness issues have been poor, haven't they? And that's been quite frustrating. But yeah, it does just feel a bit like, I almost feel like everybody's got a price, whereas like I think in the past you always think, well, I hope someone doesn't pay the price. Whereas now I think I'm a little bit like, well, if people pay the price for our players, and that means a rebuild, then you sort of just go with it, really. I mean, but players have made so many mistakes that it's tough. I mean, I suppose Ollie Cooper is one where
he's one of the few on my list.
Yeah, you wouldn't want him to go, would you?
No.
Certainly not at this stage. I mean, he probably will go. Like I can't see him spending all his career here. But yeah, I do know what you mean. It does feel a little bit just flat in general, doesn't it? I mean, when the season ends, I don't think anyone's going to be too sorry to see the back of it, because it does just feel like a slog at the moment. And, there's tough games to come as well, isn't it? I think that's the way you look at it. I mean, whereas we've got Middlesbrough the weekend, I mean, they're going so well, aren't they? And then we've got Millwall, who are also towards the top. And before the international break, then we've got Bristol City, who've also been on very good form. So, it just feels difficult at the moment, doesn't it? And, you just don't see a great deal of points coming in the next few games.
No, and we spoke a few weeks ago, didn't we, and about us not potentially winning the game between now and the end of the season. And he said, well, there's so many games left, you'd assume so, that we would. But then if I asked you to identify the games in which we would win, it's much harder task. I mean, we do have Wigan and Huddersfield coming up in, was it next month?
Yeah.
It's those look like two very winnable games. And as far as their ongoing form is concerned, they both look like they're not even trying to mount a credible end of season charge. So you look at it and you just think, these teams are a bit hopeless in themselves. But you just don't want to be one of those, do you? You don't want to be those teams that just goes through the motions and stuff. As you say, the end of the season, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to miss this season at all, Russell Martin included, to be honest with you. But where do you stand on this divide. I mean, there's obviously Swans fans at the moment, and they're becoming more vocal. A growing band of people who are airing their frustrations during the game, or at least at the game, whether it be at full time or whatever. And there's the other half that say, you have to back the team. The only way they're going to get out of this rut is if the fans give them unwavering, loud mental support, despite everything they're seeing and repeating to see every week. I mean, it's hard to take which side seriously, because I do get that kind of unbelievable backing would spur a team on, but at the same time, don't the fans need to get something back?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, I don't think booing during a game is ever going to help realistically.
No, not during a game for sure.
But it's. Look, I think that really does need to be reserved for if you've got a situation where people are actively not trying. Then I think in that case, can't really argue if you're taking dog's abuse off the crowd, because that is nowhere near good enough. That's the bare minimum, non-negotiable.
I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not one to boo. Absolutely, definitely not one to boo during the game. But I understood it to be the boos were directed at Russell Martin. Now that could be way off, but and obviously, we talked about Russell Martin not addressing the ongoing issues, etc., etc. We've spoken about over many podcasts. If they are not addressed at the pitch and the players, but at the dugout, does that change your outlook on full-time booing, for example?
Well, it's hard to know if that is exactly the case, and I think you're probably right, because I think it quite often is when players are making some what you could consider to be passes that are a bit dodgy, or we're giving the ball away in cheap areas, and I feel now it is a bit of a snub towards the manager's tactics, really, because people just feel like it's not working, and to a point, it's hard to argue with that, because it does feel like this isn't, the Swansea way that we've seen previously, the successful one. This is one where we're taking too many risks in the wrong areas, and then in the right areas, we're not taking many risks. It's quite slow. We don't have a great deal of options on the ball because the formation doesn't suit us. And, some players that are getting picked that we don't agree with as well. I think Ladabodier being a great example. Somebody who's played nearly every game this season, it feels like, and just isn't good enough. And there's been other alternatives to be used that haven't been. So, I do think there is an element of frustration now with the manager. I think a lot of it is being aimed at him. And, I'm not saying it's necessarily the right thing to do, but at the same time, I'm frustrated with him as well. I think he's making mistakes. I think he's not learning. And I think now there are severe doubts about whether he is the right man for the job. Now, I know that there's issues with the board, and whoever's in charge is going to get held back by them.
Yeah.
The manager's immune for criticism either, does it? I mean, he has made a lot of mistakes. As I've said, defensively, we're getting worse. I mean, there's no way that he isn't to blame for that. I mean, so, look, it's a difficult one. It doesn't feel like a nice environment at the moment. Obviously, me and you didn't go to Luton. It did sound like that was a little bit different. Quite often away from home, you do get a better atmosphere, and, maybe it's not as toxic and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I do understand people's frustrations. It's just that, are they being aired in the right way? I think sometimes you're better off maybe voicing them at the end as opposed to doing the game. I mean, if you're doing it during, you're not gonna, you can imagine if you're low on confidence and you're not playing well.
No, there's no element. There's no time at all. I think booing during the game is right. I don't think it'll ever work in any sense. I don't think anyone who's ever been booed during a game has turned it round. So unless you're actively wanting, your team to lose, then the booing during the game is always going to be counterproductive. But if we assume that any and all boos were to happen at a full time, and before that no boos at all, I guess the question then for the fan base is it okay to boo at full time? Because, I mean, that is not going to affect that evening's performance, that day's performance, because it's done. And then if you're not going to express your frustrations, as you rightly put it, Steve, when are you?
Yeah, I think that's the tricky thing, isn't it? I think it's just I think it's got to be reasonable as well, isn't it? Like sometimes people are, maybe a little bit too much on some players' backs or some other. But then again, you do feel as if the owners are getting off a little bit scot-free here. They're not really getting a great deal of abuse. But I suppose that the other problem is we have absent leadership, don't we? I mean, the owners are not here. They're leaving other people to carry the can. I mean, Julian Winter has gone into hiding, hasn't he? That's not great either. So arguably then the manager is the one that's having to front up. So I do have some sympathy. And I do think if it wasn't for that Birmingham game where we completely surrendered, and obviously the substitutions were a big part of it, then the manager wouldn't be taking off as much abuse. It does feel like that was a little bit of a turning point. But, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I get everybody's frustrations because I'm frustrated, and I think you are as well. And, but booing during a game, let's not go there. I think it's better if people just walk out, to be honest with you, rather than, just sticking the boot in, because we have got, the youngest squad in the league, which has been mentioned once or twice.
He hasn't mentioned that.
Booing is not going to help confidence, is it? I mean, it certainly wouldn't help me if I was playing, and I think I'm not playing well. I'm low on confidence, and people are giving me stick, and it's like, it's not going to make me play any better. So, and I'm sure it's like that for all the players as well. So, I think we do need to cut them a little bit of slack. Everyone's allowed their opinion. Just maybe don't air it as, maybe as vocally over the next few games, because I just don't think it's going to help. Although, as I say, I understand everybody's frustrations in the same way you probably do.
Swans fans will never agree. I don't think there's a time when Swans fans have agreed on anything. So there's just the newest thing to divide the fan base, Steve. We'd be completely out of order, not to mention a couple of key points worthy of discussion from the Luton game. First of all, making a substitution 10-15 seconds before half-time. The right or the wrong thing to do?
Probably the wrong, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit of a waste. And I mean, in general, it's not the end of the world, is it? I think we probably wouldn't be having this discussion if it wasn't for the fact of what happened the other week, would we? Where, where I'm going to put it, where Latapogie's gone off injured because we've made a couple of spaced out subs and we've gone down to 10, and it's contributed to our loss to Birmingham, isn't it? I mean, if that hadn't happened, it probably wouldn't have been a big deal what happened the other day. But, because it did, and then that sub was made, you're thinking, well, straight away, is this going to make us run into a problem later in the game? I mean, did it impact Martin with his other subs? I don't know, is the honest answer. It's hard to tell, isn't it? But, I think with it being 10 to 15 seconds, maybe we should have just left it. But, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not the end of the world, is it? But, yeah, it's become a talking point because of what happened the other week, which was a big cock-up.
Yeah, It exists as a talking point because of Birmingham, and it comes back to the old thing of learning lessons and stuff. But there will be fans, and there have been fans, who said that it was the right thing to do, because what if we'd conceded? To which my counter argument is, well, if you're down to 10 for 10 seconds and you can't keep the ball out your net for 10 seconds, then we've got deeper issues than any of us realised. But the other talking point, Steve, is the red card for Russell Martin following. First of all, he got a yellow card. I think it was for berating the linesman and fourth official following Liam Cullen's borderline offside. I think he was on. From the still, it looks very, very, very close. But when you watch the move in real time, it just feels like as the ball leaves, because you get it from the moment where it's at Perot's foot, but it feels like as he's moving, Cullen's direction is still bending towards our goal. So I feel like that was in that action of him passing, because you'll never get the exact moment it leaves the foot and all that nonsense. We haven't got the technology for that. We're just still doing best guesses. I feel like his action of coming back towards the goal brings him on. It certainly looked that way in real time. He gets a yellow for that, and then ends up in a bit of a scuffle with one of the Luton Town bench and sent off by the ref. It's embarrassing, isn't it? It feels like part of a sideshow that we could really do without at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell exactly what happened still, isn't it, really? Because, the camera really only caught the end of it. But, I mean, you could see from Martin's interview afterwards that he's
Yeah,
it basically, isn't he? I think that's what the thing is. And it just feels like he's feeling the pressure, which is understandable, really, because obviously we're struggling and he's probably frustrated, not just how we're playing and the results are going, but obviously the owners as well because of what happened in January. So, and probably some of the fans who have been, on his back. So,
yeah.
it's, you've got to, I think Martin has to work on his poker face a little bit and just keep his head a bit more, because he finds it very difficult, doesn't he?
He's very passionate, and he's heart on sleeve kind of guy, which when things are going well, I mean, that's the guy you want in your corner, isn't it? Because he's going to say it as it is, and he's going to rally the troops and stuff like that. When the chips are down and you need a cool head,
it's not him, is it? I think that's the issue, and you wonder sometimes, is it becoming a little bit of a problem? I certainly don't think it's a good thing anyway, but he's probably is feeling the pressure. I mean, he's still quite an experience, isn't he, in management terms, and but there's probably going to be a ban for that, and that's not ideal. And I mean, if it's a 3-game ban, it's probably going to include the Cardiff game, isn't it? So, but I mean, he might not still be in a job by then. Who honestly knows? Because if this carries on, then the pressure on his position is only going to increase. But it's not a great look, was it?
I just didn't like the whole. I think if he wasn't on a booking, I'd probably cut him a little bit more slack, because he's in that situation, heat of the moment. He's, according to his version of events, again, we have to take it because we haven't seen them ourselves, but he stepped on the pitch, the member of the Luton coaching staff, and he's told him to get off, and then they've ended up pushing and shoving each other or whatever, and it's caused that big brawl in the dugout. It's something I've never really, you don't see very often, is it? And having the manager then, like, the fact they were both sent off, Russell Martin must have known. He must have had that in the back of his head. He can't have simply forgotten he'd been booked like 10 minutes earlier. So that's where I kind of lose that bit of sympathy, where I'm thinking, if a player did that on the pitch, right? Say a player committed a cynical foul and he's on a booking, and then 10 minutes later he commits another cynical foul, and you're thinking, are you an idiot? You're walking, yeah? I know it's not the same effect of a manager being sent off as a player, but Joe, he was a player for 20 odd years. So to see him show that immaturity, I feel like, and then getting frog marched off across the pitch, sarcastic clapping and cheering with their way end, who by all accounts sound like they were very much in defence and support of Russell Martin, which is fair enough. It felt like to me like a pitch invader being marched off, cheering the fans as he was doing so. It was just a bit weird. I had not seen anything like that before, and it wasn't something I was particularly punching the air about myself, thinking, yeah, that's what we want to see, because as you say, he's very, very passionate man, and he's probably could do with just trying to keep his head a little in these situations, couldn't he?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I say, it's not a good thing, is it? And he will suffer himself now, won't he? Because he obviously won't be on the touchline, I wouldn't have thought, for some games. So look, it's just another thing that's not great, isn't it? But it just feels like a never-ending list at the moment, doesn't it? So yeah, a lesson to be learned for him, I think.
Yeah, we'll probably get a nice little fine for it as well, which I'm sure will please everyone. So Luton was the first of 3 tricky games coming up, which, to be honest, there were 5 or 6 tricky games, but this trio of games of the 3 teams of the 4 occupying the playoff spots, Borough are probably the form team anywhere at the moment, aren't they? Since Michael Carrick's taken over there, they've just pissed the league, really, haven't they? There's every chance they might catch the top 2. certainly one of the top two, and then the way they're playing at the moment and scoring goals for fun as well, it really doesn't excite about the prospect of the weekend's game.
It feels like the worst team we could probably play, doesn't it, at the moment? A team that have really been on form since Michael Carrick took the job, doing really well there. They've given Reading a pasting the other day, 5-0, I think it was, wasn't it? I think we should be a bit concerned about this. This doesn't look like a good one. I mean, we're already going into every game pretty much thinking that we can't keep a clean sheet. We're playing a free-scoring team that are on form. Chupa Akpom, I think, is the top scorer in the league, isn't he? And he's been on fire. It's a concerning fixture, I think, isn't it? I mean, the only positive I can offer right now is that it's Saturday, 3:00, which we haven't had anywhere near enough of recently. So that's something to look forward to. But I'm fearing the worst. This doesn't look good at all. Tough fixture. If I was offered a draw right now, I would snap your hand off for it.
Well, just like Swans, to go and pull it out of the bag when you least expect it. And if any game I least expect it, it's certainly this one. But Steve, I made a habit recently of asking for some glimmer of hope, some positivity, because the podcasts have in general been a bit shit. They've been really downbeat, haven't they? And I apologise to those long-suffering listeners who have to put up with me whinging every week. But give us some positivity, give us a glimmer of hope, and don't mention that it's just a Saturday, because people aren't going to be able to hang off that.
Well, like you said, the Swans do like to spring the odd surprise, so there is that. I don't really know what else to say, to be honest with you. Because, we look defensively, we're a shambles. We're playing against a free-scoring team. It's, well, what else can you realistically say?
The recall
doesn't look good
for Jamie Patterson. Is that a good thing? Is that desperation? Can we at least paint that? Because my view on this, I'm not going to bring into it, but can we paint the Jamie Patterson thing as a good news story, something we can look at and say, let's get him back and firing, and let's see the old Joel Perreault, Jamie Patterson partnership back up and running? Am I being an idiot for even saying those words?
Literally in a year, he's barely done anything. So
yeah,
like, you'll have to forgive me for not feeling a huge amount of optimism at him coming back into the team. So yeah,
I mean, should he after everything that's gone on? But this is the positivity section, so I'm trying to give us something. We got anything?
Look, it's 90 minutes. Only 11 players can play for each team. We will see. Law of averages does suggest maybe we'll do a performance and a win. I can't say I think we're going to get them, but look, it is what it is. It's a game closer to the end of the season.
We both predicted the correct score for Rotherham, didn't we? I think we both said a draw. So, Middlesbrough, surprise me.
3-0 Middlesbrough.
Well, we're still in the positivity section, Steve. Well, that is your positive, is it? Negative was 8-0, was it?
Well, they scored 5 last week, so to concede 3 wouldn't be as bad as 5, would it?
Oh, God, how the mighty have fallen. I can't say anything other than a away win for this one. But Swans have done the unthinkable and done the stupidest things you can imagine. And losing the games we've lost recently and then going to win this one, well, it would just be another line in the history book for the Swans, wouldn't it? So, but I'm not an idiot, and I'm going to go true to form and say that Middlesbrough are going to win this one 2-0. And that's a blessing, given the current form. So let's fingers crossed that we're both wrong and that the Swans actually do pull a rabbit out of the hat for this one. Well, I think it's time we should actually just wrap this up then, and hopefully the Swans can find the most unlikeliest of wins on Saturday, and next week's pod can be a whole happy section. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Until next time, from myself and Steve, bye-bye.